Okay, you're live.
This is Senate Transportation. It's May 28th. We are hopefully in the downhill drag of all of this. And we are here to talk about the miscellaneous DMV bill and the comparison between what the House did and where we are. Just to start this off, I thought that we would have Damien in to talk about what the commissioner of DMV was talking about yesterday. Damien did a little digging to try to better understand what the issues are around that. So if you would tell us what you found out, Damien, that would be helpful.
Sure. For the record, my name is Damien Leonard. I'm from the Office of Legislative Counsel. So the core issue here is that when you're issuing a real ID, you have to run the documentation for someone's citizenship through the U.S. Customs and Immigration Services SAVE database, which is something that all 50 states have access to. And what it does is it checks those documents over. And what can happen is that if you have a fraudulent document, so someone who has a, forged passport, or if the US government knows they're here illegally, that document will ping back and basically say, this person does not have legal status in the country. They are breaking federal immigration law. And so that becomes really important because of a memo that just came out from US DOT. The Secretary of the US Department of Transportation just sent out a memo to all state departments of transportation. And what it said, and I'll just quote from pieces of it here, is that as recipients of such DOT funds, you have entered into legally enforceable agreements with the US government and are obligated to comply fully with all applicable federal laws and regulations. As Secretary of Transportation, and I'm skipping down, I'm responsible for ensuring recipients of DOT financial assistance are aware of and comply with all applicable legal obligations. So he starts by talking about discrimination issues and the current administration's opposition to DEI programs on the basis that they're discriminatory, or I should say, on their belief that they are discriminatory. And then he goes on to say, in addition, your legal obligations require cooperation generally with federal authorities in the enforcement of federal law, including cooperating with and not impeding U.S. Immigrations and Customs Enforcement and other federal offices and components of the Department of Homeland Security in the enforcement of federal immigration law. And then he notes that some recipients of federal financial assistance have declined to cooperate with ICE investigations or have issued driver's licenses to individuals present in the United States in violation of federal immigration law, or have otherwise acted in a manner that impedes federal law enforcement. Such actions undermining the federal sovereignty and the enforcement of immigration law compromise the safety and security of transportation systems supported by DOT financial assistance, and prioritize illegal aliens over the safety and welfare of the American people, whose federal taxes fund DOT's financial assistance programs. Again, I'm quoting from Secretary Duffy's letter here.
He's such a lovely guy.
And then finally, to skip ahead, declining to cooperate with the enforcement of federal immigration law or otherwise taking action intended to shield illegal aliens from ICE detection contravenes federal law and may give rise to civil and criminal liability. Accordingly, DOT expects its recipients to comply with federal law enforcement directives and cooperate with federal officials in the enforcement of federal immigration law, The department also expects its recipients to ensure that the federal financial assistance they receive is provided only to subrecipients, businesses, and service providers that are U.S. citizens, nationals, or lawful permanent residents, or allowed to do business in the U.S. and do not employ illegal aliens. So those are some of the key takeaways from this letter. And it goes on to say that it retains the authority to do audits and also withhold funding. And that failure to support the enforcement of federal immigration law or shielding of known illegal aliens from federal immigration could result in the loss of funding. And so my understanding of the issue that the commissioner was raising yesterday is that once DMV has pinged the SAVE system, they are on notice if it comes back with a flag that this individual is here in violation of federal immigration law. So the concern is if they then knowingly turn around and say, we can't give you a real ID, but we could give you a state ID, that could be seen as shielding an individual who's in the United States illegally. And there's a difference between that and when someone, which could be any one of us, comes up to the counter and says, either I don't have the documents with me to prove that I'm in the country legally or a citizen, or I don't wish to provide them. What else? Here's the documents I'm willing to provide. What can you do? And in that case, they haven't done an inquiry into your legal status. They're not on notice as to whether you're here legally or not. And so in that case, that would be completely normal for them to say, well, if you have these documents, you can apply for a driver's privilege card, or you don't have documents enough to get any form of ID from us. Here's a list of acceptable documents that you would need to provide for the different forms of ID. And so that would be the normal information they would provide to someone when they come up to the window, as opposed to here where they've now put in an inquiry into the federal database and gotten a bounce back. And as I understand it, the 3 instances the commissioner was talking about in the past year were 3 instances where someone had come to them and applied for a real ID and provided a document that was either fraudulent or raised a flag on the federal Customs and Immigration Services database that said this individual is in violation of federal immigration law. And so at that point, they are obligated under the current administration's guidance to not proceed with that individual. And I know that we have other statutes regarding the level of information sharing and so forth, but they can't go forward without risking being seen as shielding that individual. And that was the concern raised by their counsel. Does that make sense?
Go ahead.
Well, I appreciate this, and I also appreciate the letter that we were provided with. It says confidential communication, so I don't know if I'm allowed to read it out loud. I assume we're going to post it, so maybe it's not confidential, but well, I'll just start by saying I'm extremely disappointed with the federal government, and I feel that this is going to end up being a overreach into our own identification processes, and it's going to be used, as we've seen nationally, as a way to limit access to important documentation and make people feel unsafe in their communities, and potentially lead to us having to be put in a position where they're basically outing people who are in underdocumented situations, and that just makes my blood run cold. And it's really scary, and I'm very sad that we are, what I'm hearing, going to be needing to go along with this is kind of what I'm hearing. It just, frankly, it's horrific. I think that if we're going to kowtow to an authoritarian administration at this point, when are we going to say no? It seems like, yeah, I just have a lot of issues, and to even have the start of the memo be DEI, who's next? Is it going to be our foot friends who are non-binary, who maybe their document doesn't match, so somehow that flags in a system? I mean, I have a lot of concerns, and I think it's extremely unfortunate that the administration, the attorney general, and the MV has decided that this is the best course of action to protect us against some amorphous threat of federal money being taken away. So that's how I feel. However, with that being said, I have a couple of questions. And then if this is really where people feel we need to go, fine. Like, I don't think my vote is going to matter on this, frankly. So I have a couple questions. The first is, so right now, this is what we're doing. What I heard from those three examples was we weren't shielding those folks. So why do we need to change anything to continue the same practice we've been doing?
So, I don't know that I can fully flesh this out. I think, and again, I'm gonna try not to put any words in the DMV's mouth that, but as I understand their position, their concern is that looking at the language in the law, their attorney flagged it as this would be something that would raise a flag. And then if we say to the extent permitted by federal law, it would indicate just that the legislative intent is that you continue doing what you're doing and complying with federal law as that goes. So that's my understanding. Did I capture that?
So
So
they're not changing anything.
right. So I think it's, and again, I can't advocate for what they've requested, but I think, as I understand it, is they're requesting language that would allow them to continue functioning the way they're functioning, which was, I think, what was discussed when we put that language in there in the House, because they indicated we're already providing this information if someone comes to us, but they hadn't raised those three issues that came up in the past year where there was a fraudulent document or a flag raised by USCIS. So it is really a question of walking that fine line and deciding whether the language there would be appropriate or maybe there's another way to approach it. That said, I don't know if you necessarily have to figure that out today, because if you decide to ask for a conference committee rather than concurring with further proposal of amendment, that would be, you could make that decision in conference committee as to how to formulate the language.
So I think we get what the issue is. So here's what I'll tell you I hear in this. There's some interest around tinted windows and what the changes have made. There's, and I rely mostly on you to, for the tinted windows. The bike language is new. We've got this real ID, whether or not we really need to do something. I think we're willing. I haven't heard anybody talk about the SSI or SSDI issue at all. I will tell you a little bit. Those are pretty for people, and I hate to give up. I hate to give up without at least some conversation about that. And then there's the purchase and use study report, which people do or don't hear. I don't think, personally, I had the conversation with two of the three of our conferees on education funding. I would doubt very much that they're going to be done this week. And it probably go into, I don't think these issues are that big a deal. I'm going to say personally, I do not want to be on a conference committee for, the miscellaneous DMV bill, period, end of sentence. But a very short conference committee to figure out what, particularly this real ID language, if what we should do or shouldn't with all of that, and what makes you comfortable. I would not be opposed. I think from conversations with everybody around the table, the three most likely people to be on a conference committee on this are you, and you. But I'm open to anything anybody wants to say, because there's not that much in here that I really think is absolutely a must to do right this minute. So what's your pleasure? And I've stated my position, so what's your pleasure? And I do not want to be on the conference committee on this myself. Period.
So can I just, does the language that the commissioner proposed yesterday, to the extent permitted by federal law, fix that and put us in a better place with that?
I think it does. I think I agree with DMV's attorney that to the extent that someone is potentially reading this looking for a reason to hold up funding or target Vermont, I think it just clarifies what I think we all would understand is that, federal law generally preempts state law. There are areas where the state law is supreme. There are things that are reserved to the states, but particularly when you're talking about federal funding, we deal with federal preemption all the time. And the DMV and Agency of Transportation live in that world. And I think we understand that generally they have to comply with federal regulations and federal requirements. So I think that putting that language in, I realize that it sends a message politically, and there's more to it than just the legal reality. But legally, I don't think it significantly changes or detracts from the intent there, but it does send a message that the intent was that they comply with federal law. Politically, it's obviously a different question. Trying to think if there's anything else. No, I think I've answered your question. So
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I personally would like us to concur with the House version. I really like the bike language. I think it's pretty well done. The big issue for me would be the SSD stuff. However, all the tinted windows very close to my heart. I would fight tooth and nail for him if we ended up going to the conference committee, but that would be the main one. And I don't believe we have any money in the budget to make room for that. So that would be, if we're gonna go into it that way.
You could always put that into place, a year. I mean,
I see what you're saying.
there's ways to, I will tell you, that's a pretty core section of our population.
Yeah. Okay, but my preference would be that we concur and move forward, but if folks felt that we wanted to go to bat for some of those things this year, I'm happy to move that. This change would be a hard one for me to advocate for. So I guess my only other question would be, to the extent permitted under federal law. So if the feds go, actually every time that we have any kind of flag that's raised in the saves thing, you have to give us that person's information, provide us all of their documents, give us their home address, provide any contact information. If federal law said that, what would happen if we changed it?
So the
If
language,
it, or if they said the DEI programs, actually you can't offer. DEI is putting X on a real ID. DEI is if you allow someone to have, I don't know, their name doesn't match the kind of name that we want on a driver's license because it
Mhm.
got an umlaut or something. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like if they said we need you to change these things, would we be caught that we would have to do it if we changed it?
so I think one of the important things here is that that all that section is saying is that the commissioner shall continue to inform individuals of the option of obtaining an operator's privilege card or a non-driver ID. It doesn't even guarantee them the right,
Yeah.
right? So it's, you still have to, provide the right documentation, meet the legal requirements. So it doesn't get into issues of information sharing, which are dealt with in other statutes that we have. And I think that if we get to a point where the federal government says you have to turn over all this information or we're going to withhold all of that state funding, that's an area where I expect that the administration and the attorney general will be fighting hard to uphold the law. And the governor did just sign into law another bill that is further sort of setting guardrails around what our state agencies and law enforcement can do with respect to federal law enforcement and immigration issues.
Yeah, it's 44.
Yes.
Yeah, so in a state of emergency, we can't just have them automatically be deputized. Yeah, that's true.
Right. And there are other laws dating back.
So if I understand your answer correctly, like, no.
Yeah, this is basically saying that it's saying that if you added that language, what it would be saying is that to the extent that federal law permits them to, they would continue to inform individuals that they have the option of obtaining these other licenses. And I think what the commissioner raised yesterday is that under the current situation, unless and until they get better clarity and get it resolved, when they've gotten a flag from federal immigration that an individual is here illegally. And it's worth noting too that this process, so when a flag comes up on the SAVE database, they have to do a second check. And so it's not an instant, so normally when you go to the DMV, while you wait, they process your documents and they get the okay. In this case, what happens is the flag comes up and they have to do a follow-up check, in which case they say, we can't issue the license today. We're doing a follow-up check. We'll be in touch. And so what would happen at that point is if it comes back that they get confirmation that this individual is flagged in the system as being here illegally, or that's a fraudulent document, they send a letter that says, essentially, we can't issue you the real ID that you requested. And at that point, they just wouldn't include something that says, by the way, you can get these other state IDs. And so that's basically what we're talking about at this point, if I'm understanding the process correctly. So I spent a while after we met yesterday discussing this with the DMV, with the commissioner and deputy commissioner, and walking through what the process is. And it sounds like in these instances, they would just not be sending that information versus an instance where someone walks up and says, the person at the DMV desk says, okay, here's what I need. And they say, I don't have that. Or I don't want to give you my birth certificate. And then the DMV says, well, here are the documents that I need to have here's what's acceptable proof of all the different things we need. And then they can walk through that. The person can decide what ID type they want to get and what what requirements they want to meet, or whether they just want to walk away and say, okay, I don't want to share that information with the government. I'm going to choose not to get an ID today. So it's really more of they're providing information already to individuals to help them figure out what ID is appropriate for them. And then, they have like an ID comparison on their website that walks you through what do each of these IDs do, what do they look like, what documents do you need to provide, and that's the same information they would provide. And I think if I understand their intent right here is when they send that letter after the follow-up check, they would not be sending information that says, by the way, here are some other options for you.
And it sounds like we've only had 3 individuals who have come up in the SAVE system
In the past year, I
in the
believe.
past year.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm okay with this, if that is all accurate information. What deeply concerns me is that the federal government is using information that is inaccurate to flag people as criminals. They've literally sent a man to El Salvador to a prison because they claim that he has a criminal record that does not exist based on tattoos on his hands. So I do not trust a database that is managed by the federal government at this point. So it makes me very concerned that that person will then potentially, if this list grows and, if you've got a freedom and unity tattoo that's considered you're in a terrorist organization and a criminal, and they add that to the list, then that person doesn't know that they could get another ID. I don't know. I know it's all hypothetical, but we're in extremely strange times and I'm comfortable with this. And I don't think I'm going to fight for it in a conference committee, but if there are 2 others on it who can, I'll let them
So
lead the.
I think the question in front of us is, should we go to a quick conference committee? I think you said no.
A quick conference committee. I don't know what you're-
Well, I don't think the issues are that big. I don't think the issues are that big between the House and the Senate. So I'm not envisioning that this would take days.
If we're not going past the education committee or the education.
No, yeah, well,
Really, we're finishing before them. Just saying.
But go to a conference committee
Yeah.
versus not go to a
Yes.
conference committee. That's-
Yeah, would you,
Okay.
how do people feel about going to a conference committee versus not?
I'd rather go to a conference committee or ask for a further instance of it.
Okay,
Those are the 2 choices, right? What other choices are there? Or concur?
With no.
Okay, definitely not.
Concur.
okay,
No.
okay.
I would advocate for a conference committee unless we think we can hash out send them something that would be acceptable to them, and I'm not sure we can do that either. So,
Okay.
Conference committee makes sense.
Okay, I think the will around the table, because I would agree with that. I think, I just, with this issue, having it come up, I really don't know what the opinion of the Transportation Committee in the House is. And we do have these other smaller issues, and I think we can bank it out between them. And my recommendation to the President Pro Tem is going to be 3 of you.
Okay, can I ask a couple of questions about this, the ID? Or are we past that?
No, I just, I got what I want, and I'm gonna make them, and you got what I'm gonna recommend
Okay.
to the President Pro Tem. And sure, ask the question.
Just a super quick question, and I'll have more other questions once is this the language? By this, I mean the recommendation of the
I've not seen this. but-
yes, is that what is being suggested as the language?
Yes, from DMV. Yeah.
Okay, I
Um,
just want to understand more.
I don't,
yeah, I would draft it a little bit differently.
Okay, so we don't have
Yeah.
language yet that we're
But yeah,
considering. But something similar to that is what you're anticipating? And if we don't have language yet, that answers my question.
I don't understand that either. I don't see what we need to have in there in this. Could you got this something?
Absolutely. I've got some language worked out. I see there's some, yeah, I can work with this and then come up with language that you can work on. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking about, is if that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, and I think some of it is clarifying, like obtaining versus applying for, clarifies that you're not necessarily guaranteed. I think I see some concern about using the word shall.
I also wondered if we just said if they were, instead of saying if they were, that they failed. Like you can tell people for other reasons, like if they don't wish to comply, you shall continue to be informed. But if they are unable to, then you don't. But I don't know if that's more complication.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I just want to say there are a lot of people who were born here who don't have the materials. You know, they don't have their birth certificate, and they have changed their name, and they can't prove that they are the same person after they've changed their name. So the real ID is, it's a whole issue itself, whether or not the folks are here, legally.
Well, we also have to keep in mind that whatever we do, we're satisfying federal requirements, whether we like them or not.
Right. Well, I remember when the Real ID came about, and its purpose is to be a document that lets you go between countries. I mean, that was the purpose.
To
And
make it easier for people.
yeah,
That's what we did it for.
yeah,
I got I was in the first 3 people that got the first real ID. It was
In Vermont.
Senator Mazza, Governor Douglas, and I chaired the House Transportation.
Oh, okay.
And the 3 of us got our first and enhanced driver's licenses together, and they were the
Yeah.
first 3. And it was meant to make stuff easier for people.
Right, to go to other countries.
Right, go across the border to Canada, and go to the Caribbean and get on a plane.
Right. And just recently, 20 years later, I didn't realize it was 05, they actually started enforcing it and saying, now it's time.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that you have to have a real ID, because you can have a passport, but just, it was, this year was, folks were, very tense about the deadline to get the real
Right,
ID.
and now,
Yeah.
just if I may, we're at 92% compliance for Real ID right now.
Oh, I wanted to, okay, so what does that mean? I
It means
need,
that 92% of Vermonters already have Real ID.
okay, so 92% of licenses are real IDs?
Correct.
That's higher than I thought it would be. Thank you.
All right. At that, I think Megan